Meriones. Meriones was the first to speak to famous Idomeneus. And he said, Idomeneus, son of Deucalion, where do you think that we should jump back into the fray? Should we start on the right, or in the middle, or on the left? Where do you think that the Achaeans with their long flowing hair might need us the most? And Idomeneus, the lord of the Cretans, said, well, in the middle, the ships are already well defended by both Ajaxes and by Teucer, who is the best of all of the Achaeans with the bow and arrow. Now I think that these men, they can hold back Hector, even though he is rushing forward and very strong, even though he now desires to fight beside our ships and to set our ships on fire. I don't think he will be able to, not unless Zeus, the son of Kronos himself, throws firebrands on our ships. The big Ajax, Telamonian Ajax, that guy, he can stand up to anybody, any mortal. Anyone who eats corn, the corn of Demeter. I think that he could even stand up against man-destroying Achilles, the fast-footed one. Achilles is probably faster, but Ajax could take him one-on-one. So I think that you and I, Meriones, we should go on the left flank of the battle. That's where we're going to find out if we're going to have something to brag about or if somebody else will have something to brag about. And so now they went, Idomeneus and Meriones. Idomeneus, his courage looked like fire, and so did that of his sidekick who ran with him in his beautiful armor. The Trojans saw, and the Trojans all came in a rush. Now it was like when there is a squall that comes up from screaming winds, and it happens to be on a day where there is a lot of dust in the roads. So when that squall hits all this dust, a dust cloud erupts. Willy-nilly. And that's now how it was where the Trojans were fighting against Idomeneus and Meriones. And this is where they were all coming together with their huge spears, the spears that were skin-slicing spears that they held in their hands. And it was the rays that were glancing off the bronze from their newly polished breastplates and their shining shields and their gleaming helmets. Those rays would have blinded anybody. You would have had to have been a bold man to have looked on this battle and be happy and not felt some grief. Now, there were two powerful sons of Kronos. They were the ones who brought all of these hateful pains on our heroes. Zeus. The son of Kronos. He wanted to give glory to Hector and to the Trojans, but he didn't want to completely destroy the Achaeans in front of Troy. It was only that he wanted to honor Achilles, fast-footed Achilles, and he wanted to honor Thetis and her strong son Achilles. And Poseidon, Poseidon, he was always trying to defend the Achaeans. After he had come up from out of the gray sea, he was so sad to see the Trojans being beaten down by the Achaeans, and he was really pissed at Zeus. Now, these two, they were part of the same family. I mean, they had the same dad, but Zeus was born first, and he knew more things. So Poseidon wouldn't even dare to defend the Achaeans openly, but in secret, he was always trying to wake the battle among the Achaeans, always looking like a man. Now, these two, they threw a kind of twisted noose of powerful war and conflict all around both sides, the Argives and the Trojans, that could not be broken and could not be loose. And Idomeneus, even though he was half gray, under the helmet, at the temples, he was running and calling to all of the Danaans, and the first man that he killed was Othryoneus. Now, Othryoneus, he was a man who came from Cabeces. He had just newly arrived at Troy. He had come after glory, and he had asked Priam for the hand of his prettiest daughter, Cassandra. Without a bride price. Instead, Othryoneus, he promised to do a great thing, that he would push back all of the Achaeans away from Troy against their will. And Priam agreed to the marriage. And so it was with faith in these promises that Othryoneus was fighting for the Trojans. But Idomeneus killed him. His breastplate that had held so well before now gave way to the spear that went into the middle of his stomach. And he fell with a thud. And Idomeneus bragged over the body. Hey, Othryoneus, you're pretty good at keeping those promises to Priam, aren't you? You know, we heard that he promised you his daughter in exchange. Well, guess what? We're good at keeping our promises too. So why don't you come with us, and we'll promise you one of the son of Atreus' most beautiful daughters. We'll bring her all the way here from Argos. Yeah, if you just come back to our ships and help us sack the well-settled city of Troy. Come on now, come to our ships, and we'll make a great marriage for you. And you'll see that we're not bad matchmakers at all. That's what he said. And he grabbed him by the foot and dragged him back out of the hateful battle. But then Asios came as a protector. He was on foot in front of his chariot so that his horse was always breathing on his shoulders. And his sidekick was holding the chariot behind him. And now Asios, he really, really wanted to hit Idomeneus. But instead, Idomeneus hit Asios clean through the neck with his spear. So now he fell like a dry oak tree or a white poplar or a tall pine. Like these trees fall when they're up in the mountains and the men come, the builders, and they chop it down with whetted axes and turn it into the planks for ships. That's now how Asios fell gasping out his life in front of his horses and his chariots as he grasped at the bloody earth. And his charioteer who had such strong wits before, was now frozen and couldn't even turn the chariot back away from enemies with his hands. And now Antilochus, Nestor's son, came rushing in at him and hit him with the spear so that he fell out of the chariot with a thud. And Antilochus, the son of Nestor, took the horses and drove them back towards the Achaean ships. Now Deiphobus. Oh no. Deiphobus came grieving over Asios. And he really wanted to hit Idomeneus with his huge spear. But Idomeneus kept his eyes straight on it the whole time. He was under his huge shield. It was bronze beaten all the way around and had several layers of hide, and it had 2 crossbars. Hiding under this, Idomeneus kept his eyes on it, and the spear bounced right off and missed Idomeneus. But instead, it hit Hypsenor. Hypsenor, who is the son of Hippasos. It hit him in the liver, underneath the diaphragm, and it loosened his limbs. And now Deiphobus, he bragged over the body of Hypsenor and said, "Ha! Well, now Asios does not go unavenged. Now Asios is going to be so happy when he arrives at the strong gates of Hades because I have sent him a buddy, a companion." That's what he said. And now all of the Argives, they were full of grief, but especially Antilochus. And Antilochus, even though he was so full of grief, he did not forget his friend, but he ran over and protected the body of Hypsenor with his shield. And then Hypsenor's 2 most trusted friends, Megistius and Alastor, they came and they dragged the body out of the battle as they groaned heavily and took it back to the hollow ships. But Idomeneus, he did not stop from his battle fury. And now he killed Alcathous. Alcathous was the son of somebody I know. Isaiades. He was the son of Isaiades, and he was the more important son-in-law of Anchises. And why is that important? Because Anchises is Aeneas' dad. Okay, we're all set. So Alcathous, he had come, and he was married to Hippodamia. Now Hippodamia, Hippodamia, who's Anchises' daughter, she was so loved by both her father and her mom at home. And of all of the girls her age, she was the most beautiful and she was the wittiest, and everyone loved her work. And that was why she was married to Alcathous, who was one of the best men in all of wide Troy. But Poseidon sent Alcathous to be beaten down by the spear of Idomeneus. Alcathous froze like a column or like a high tree with its branches outstretched. Poseidon froze him so that now Idomeneus stabbed him in the middle, and the bronze tunic, which had always protected him before, now broke all around the spear, and his own body, too, broke all around the spear as he let out a shout and gasped out his last life. And the spear, it was fixed in his heart. It was fixed in his heart so that with his last heartbeats, the butt end of the spear shook. And then he fell. And darkness covered his eyes. And now Idomeneus bragged again and said, Deiphobus, what do you think about that? So now we got 3 deaths for 1. Does that seem fair to you? I mean, you were the first one to brag about this, right? So now why don't you come and take on someone who's from the family of Zeus? Because, you know Zeus? Okay, so he was the dad of Minos back in Crete. And then Minos was the dad of Deucalion. And Deucalion, well, he's my dad. And he made me rule over many men back in Crete. And then the ships came and brought me to Troy to be trouble to you and to your dad Priam and to all the Trojans. That's what he said. And now Deiphobus was torn in 2 ways in his heart. And he didn't know whether he should go try to find another buddy among the Trojans or whether he should stand and try to face Idomeneus by himself. So he decided that he should go and find Aeneas. Now Aeneas was all the way on the edge of battle because he was always pissed off at Priam, because even though Aeneas was so awesome, he did not get the honor that he deserved, at least in this moment, because this is the only moment that we have any inkling of what this is all about. And now Deiphobus comes to Aeneas and finds him and says to him, Aeneas, come now and defend your brother-in-law Alcathous. You raised him in your halls since you were little, so come and defend Alcathous, who has fallen at the hands of the Achaeans. And right away he stirred up the heart and the spirit in Aeneas, and Aeneas went. And Idomeneus, though, as he saw Aeneas rushing towards him, Idomeneus, he wasn't scared. He did not give way. Now Idomeneus, he was like a wild boar up in the mountains when he's being rushed by dogs and by men, and all of the bristles on his back go up. And his eyes flash like fire. And his teeth gnash as he runs at all of the dogs and the men that are trying to chase him. That's how Idomeneus was now. He was fierce. But he also did call out to all of his buddies. He said, Ascalaphos, and Apharius, and Deipyrus, and Menelaus, and Antilochus, you who are the counselor of war, calling out to them, friends, come and defend me, because I am alone. Come now, because Aeneas, who is fast afoot, is running towards me, and he is very powerful. He has already killed many men in battle. And more, he has the bloom of youth on his side. And it is the most powerful thing, the greatest thing. I mean, if he and I were the same age, well, then you'd really see a contest of whether or not I could carry off the victory or he could. That's what he said. And all of his friends, they all felt of the same mind, and they right away ran to his help because they were of the same mind. And they sloped their shields around his shoulders, and on the other side, Aeneas, too, he called out to his buddies. He called out to Deiphobus and Priam and Agenor. And they all came right away. They came like when there's a ram and there's a whole flock that will follow that ram. Even when the ram leaves the garden to get a drink of water, the whole flock goes. That's how they followed. And then the shepherd is so delighted because the whole flock just goes. And that's how Aeneas was happy now, because all of these men followed. And so now they all came clashing against one another, all of these men trying to cut one another's skin with the pitiless bronze. But there were two men who especially stood out, two men who were like Ares, the war god, as they tried to kill one another, and they were Aeneas and Idomeneus. And it was Aeneas. Aeneas was the first to throw his spear, but he missed. Idomeneus kept his eyes on it the whole way, but it just went off to the side. And then Idomeneus killed Oinomaos. Got him with the spear right in the middle so that it broke through his breastplate and all of his intestines pushed out through the bronze. And he fell with a thud. And Idomeneus runs and takes the spear out of the guts, but he doesn't have a chance to strip the beautiful armor from his shoulders, because now Idomeneus is hard-pressed on many sides by arrows and by spears. And you know, Idomeneus, he's not as young as he used to be, okay? He doesn't have the same kind of strength in his limbs and in his knees. He's not one of these guys who can just depend on his fast feet to get him running out of battle again. No, he's got to fight close combat with everyone as he's slowly retreating. But you know who sees him slowly retreating? Deiphobus. And Deiphobus is always so pissed at Idomeneus. And so now he comes and he's trying to hit Idomeneus, but he misses. And he hits Ascalaphos in their shoulder. Ascalaphos, who's Ares' kid. And so then he falls with a thud. And he gasps out his life. And you know, Ares, man slaughtering huge, mighty Ares, he didn't even know that his son had fallen. I mean, he was so far away. He was all the way up on Mount Olympus above the golden clouds, and he was still obeying Zeus's order that he would be shut off from the war. And he was sitting there with all the other immortals, and they were all just shut off now from the war. But Deiphobus rushes towards the body of Ascalaphos and takes the helmet, close set from the temples, off. But does it follow the Achaean feet? No, the next one does. So many helmets today. But Meriones comes, and Meriones stabs Deiphobus in the shoulder with his spear so that Deiphobus has to drop the helmet. And then Meriones, he swoops in again. Now like an eagle, he swoops in and retrieves his spear right out of the base of Deiphobus' arm. Just takes it back, and then Meriones darts back into the crowd of his buddies, so he's safe. And poor Deiphobus, well, thank God Polites is there, who's his whole brother. And Polites grabs Deiphobus around the middle, drags him out of battle, takes him back to where the horses are, back behind the front lines. And he puts him up in the chariot, and the horses, they take him back towards the city. Poor Deiphobus, he's all wore out. His new, fresh wound still pouring warm blood. But, I forgot the little horse. They took him back to Troy. But now Aeneas, he comes up against Apharius. And Aeneas hits Apharius right in the throat, where it's exposed, so that the spear goes straight through, and Apharius' whole head and his helmet and his shield and spear all slump over now to one side. And life-destroying death took him. And then Antilochus killed Thoon as he was running away. Antilochus went slashing at him with this huge sword and actually caught him along the back. There's apparently, in Greek anatomy, some kind of vein that runs all the way along the spine. And this now Antilochus sliced and excised completely with his sword, sliced through the whole thing so that he cut it out. And with that, Thoon, he fell down backwards in the dust, stretching out his hands back towards his companions. And now the Trojans, they charge at Antilochus. They're coming at him, trying to hit him through his wide shield with their spears and with their shields. And Antilochus, they're not able to pierce his flesh yet. And Poseidon is always there, protecting him. But Antilochus, he doesn't want to give way. Antilochus wants to move forward. Antilochus keeps shaking his spear at the Trojans. And now Adamas, who is Asios' son, Adamas sees Antilochus shaking his spear. And Adamas, he tries to come in, and he stabs Antilochus straight through the shield. But Poseidon breaks his spear right in half, so that the fire-tempered end of the spear is stuck in Antilochus' shield, and the rest falls to the ground. And Adamas, he's trying to run back into the crowd of his buddies because he doesn't want to get hurt by the sharp bronze. But now Meriones comes out of nowhere again. He's so good at backup. With the bitter arrow. And where do you think Meriones hits him? Hits him right between the belly button and the naughty bits. That's where man-slaughtering Ares brings death the fastest. And so he fell, and he was gasping. He was gasping out now like a bull. He was gasping like a bull that's up in the mountains, and he's escaped, and the cowboys run after him, and they get him down, and they tie him up, and they drag him back to the farm against his will. That's how he was gasping out his life. But not for too long, because then Meriones came and grabbed the spear straight out of him, and the shadow went over his eyes. And then Helenos killed Deipyrus. Helenos came with a huge Thracian sword and hacked straight at Deipyrus's helmet, so that the helmet fell off and skittered in the dust towards the feet of the Achaeans, and one of them picked it up and took it. But as for Deipyrus, dark night covered his eyes. And now, Menelaus. Menelaus he was grieving the most over Ascalaphos. So he came running at Helenos. And now these two were coming close to one another. And Helenos had his bow, holding it by the middle with his hand. And Menelaus has his sharp spear. And now they let fly at the same time. And the arrow from Helenos' bow, it bounces right off of Menelaus' breastplate. It bounces, you know how it bounces? It bounces like a black bean or a chickpea. Bounces off a winnowing floor when the winnowing fan comes. Because we've all seen that. Those beans bounce. And that's how those arrows bounced right off of Menelaus' breastplate. But Menelaus' spear, it went straight through Helenos' arm, the very arm that he was holding the bow with, so that he dropped the bow and the arrow to the ground, and he darted back into the crowd of his buddies, but he still had the spear in his arm, and his arm was dead at his side. Thankfully, noble Agenor came, pulled that spear right out of his arm, and took twisted pieces of wool and bound up the wound, and then put his whole arm in a sling and got him back into a chariot so that he could go back to the city. But now it was Pysandros that came up against Menelaus. Pysandros and Menelaus, first it was Menelaus that threw, but he missed. The spear went off to the side. And now Pysandros, he drove in with his spear. And the spear broke right behind the head, but Pysandros still felt like he'd done pretty well. And he could still win this. Now Menelaus pulled out a huge silver-studded sword. And Pysandros, underneath his oxhide shield, he was wielding a double-sided axe. An axe that had a really well-polished wood handle made of an olive tree. And so now they swung at one another at the same time. And Pysandros swung down on Menelaus' head with an axe, but the axe just bounced right off of the horn of the shield. Whereas Menelaus' sword came straight down the middle of Pysandros' bronze helmet and cracked his helmet and cracked open his skull so that his 2 bloody eyes fell out of his head into the dust at his feet. And then Menelaus put his heel on his body and started to strip his armor, bragging, Soon you will leave away from our ships, you arrogant Trojans. You Trojans who love war above all other things, as much as you love outrageous acts and shame and evil, like the shameful things that you did to me, when you had no thought in your mind whatsoever about thundering Zeus who protects hospitality. When you came to my house and you stole my wedded wife and you stole so much of my stuff, and my wife was really nice to you. And now you rage beside our ships. You want to set them on fire. You want to kill us beside their prows. And Zeus, who is the most knowledgeable of all men and gods, he lets you do this for now. He lets you be outrageous. You who rage so recklessly. You who can never get enough of war. Of all things, a man can get his fill before war of sleep and of lovemaking, of the sweet song and of the gentle dance. Of all these things, men would rather get their fill than of war. But you Trojans, you can never get enough of battle. That's what he said. And he stripped the bloody armor off of the body and handed it back to the Achaeans to take it back to their buddies. That's what blameless Menelaus did. And now it was Harpalion, who is the son of King Pylaemenes, who's the king of the Paphlagonians. Harpalion came with his dad to Troy to fight, even though he was never going to make it home. Now he came up against Menelaus, and Menelaus stabbed him. Nope. What did he do? Fuck.
Back up.
Harpalion tries to stab Menelaus' shield, but misses. But he runs back to the crowd, but Meriones comes in, and Meriones stabs Harpalion. Oh no, I'm totally lost. Perfect. Thank you. Meriones now gets him with the bitter arrow. Yes. You know where he gets him? He gets him in the right butt cheek. And the arrow goes straight through the glute, and then it shatters his hip bone, and it goes into his bladder. So that Harpalion kind of just sits back into the arms of all of his buddies. And then he lies stretched out like a worm on the ground, and his blood reddens the earth, and the darkness takes him. Now, all the Paphlagonians came around and busied themselves around the body, protecting it, and they put him back into the chariot, and started to carry him back to Troy with his father, Pylaemenes, walking alongside the chariot, grieving over the death of his son, but also because he was never going to get the blood price for the murder. Now, Paris. Now, Paris was especially sad about the death of Harpalion because Paris happened to be a guest friend of the Paphlagonians, obviously a better best friend to them than he was to Menelaus, right? Yes. And so now he, in anger over Harpalion's death, he let fly a bitter arrow. There's this guy, Euchenor. Euchenor, he is from Corinth. He's the son of Polyidus. Polyidus is a great seer, and his name means knows many things, sees many things, right? And Euchenor, well, he got onto that ship to go to Troy, knowing that he was going to die there. Many times his old man, the seer, had told him that you are either going to die from a horrible disease slowly at home, or you are going to go to Troy and be killed by a Trojan beside the Achaean ships. And so Euchenor, he went to Troy knowing what his fate was going to be. And now Paris's bitter arrow hit him in the jaw, just near the ear. And so his life quickly left his limbs, and the shadow took him. And so now they fought everywhere, like fiery fire. But, oh no, I'm out on this side. Hector didn't know what was going on. Because Hector, he was still fighting where he had first broken through the Achaean walls and the Achaean gates. He was still fighting in front of the ships of the Ajaxes and the ship of Protesilaus. That's where he had been fighting. And that's where all of the Achaeans were fighting against him. Now, remember all the people who were in the Achaeans who were fighting against Hector? There were the Boeotians. There were the Ionians. They are wearing very long tunics, as was the fashion. There were the Locrians. There are the Phthians. And there are the shining Epeans. So all of these now, they were all rushing against Hector, trying to hold him against their ships, protecting their ships. But they couldn't always drive Hector back because Hector, he was fighting like fire. You know who else was with them? The leaders of the Athenians. Those were Menestheus, who's the son of Petius, and he's with Phytus and Stichios and Bias. And then there were also, of course, the leaders of the Epeans. That was Phyleus' son Meges and Amphion and Drachios. And then there were the leaders, well, there were also the leaders of the Phthians, right? Now, those leaders were Medon and Podarches, who was always steadfast in battle. Now, Medon was actually the bastard son of Oileus. So he's Ajax's brother, right? But he lived far away because now he lived in Phylaki because he had killed his stepmom, whose name is Areopis, Areopis's brother. So he had to go to Phylaki. So that's how he ended up there. But Podarches was actually the son of Iphiclus, who was the son of Phylaki, who is, Philakos. He was like the big guy in Philaki back then. So anyway, these were the guys who were leading the Phthians, and why they're called the Phthians right now, I don't know. But they're fighting next to the Boeotians. Yes. And now the two Ajaxes. Well, the two Ajaxes, Oilean Ajax, he would never go far from Telamonian Ajax, not at this point. No, now he was always staying as close to Telamonian Ajax as when there are two oxen who are wine-colored, by the way, and they are up in the mountains, and they are yoked together so that they can pull the plow through the furrowed land. That's how close the two Ajaxes were always staying by each other, the width of the yoke. And around Telamonian Ajax, well, there were many awesome, good fighting men in their powerful armor. But around Oilean Ajax, well, the Locrians were nowhere to be seen because they did not have the brave heart for battle. Why? Because they had no bronze helmets. They did not have huge shields. They didn't even have ash spears. The Locrians had come to Troy with only their bows and arrows and their slings, which are made out of wool. And it was trusting in these that they were like, hey, we can break down the ranks of the Trojans. And so now, Ajax's guys, the big Ajax, Telamonian Ajax's guys, they're out in front because they've got their fancy armor on. But the Locrians, they're hiding out in back. And they're bombarding the Trojans with all these thrown things from their slings and from their arrows and their bows. And the Trojans are actually, well, the arrows send the Trojans into confusion. So now the Trojans would have had to go back away from the sad battle, back away from the ships. Except that Polydamas came and spoke to strong Hector. Hector, I know you're not really so convinced by words too often, but you think just because you're really good at fighting that you're really good in thinking too. The gods didn't actually give everyone everything at once, though, right? So, like one guy's really good at fighting. One guy, he's really a great dancer. One guy, he's really good with the guitar, and he's got a great singing voice. And then there's one guy who Zeus gives the brains to. And that guy, everybody else has a share in what he's got because he saves many lives. So I'm going to tell you what I think is best. Now battle burns all around you in a fiery crown. Now I do not think that we should keep fighting beside the Achaean ships, but I think that you should get all of the best men and we should rally back here. And then we can decide all together whether or not we should fall on the Trojan ships and attack, or whether we should go back to the city unharmed. Because I have a feeling these Achaeans, they want to pay us back for all the damage we did yesterday. And more. There's a man I know still sits beside their ships, and this is a man who could never get enough of battle, and he might be sitting it out now, but he will not sit it out for long. So that's what he said. And Hector really actually liked this advice of safety and not being hurt. So Hector, he jumps down from his chariot in all of his armor to the ground, and he says back, Polydamas, I want you to call all the best guys here, and then I'm going to go, and I'm going to fight over there, and I'm going to give my orders, and then I'm going to come back here. That's what he said. And Hector ran off right away, and Polydamas, who is the son of Panthous, who was really a lover of manliness, he followed those orders. Now Hector runs through the front lines, and he is looking for, Well, he's looking for the force of Deiphobus. He's looking for Lord Helenos. He's looking for Asios' son Adamas. He's looking for Hyrtakos' son Asios. But there aren't any of these guys who are unhurt and undead. So still, Hector goes. And he comes onto the left flank of the battle, and he finds Paris. And Paris is encouraging all of his guys and still fighting strong. But Hector comes close to him and addresses him with shameful words. Bad Paris! You pretty boy! You girl-loving cheater! Where now has the force of Deiphobus gone? Where is Lord Helenos? Where is Asios' kid Adamas? Where is Hyrtakos' kid Asios? Where's Othryoneus? Don't you know now that all of Ilion faces destruction from the top down? Don't you know that you face your own destruction? That's what he said. And Paris, godlike Alexander, the husband of Helen with the good hair, answered and was like, Hector, you're really fast to blame the blameless sometimes. I'm not actually withdrawing right now. My mama didn't make me a coward all the time. So just lead wherever you want to go, wherever your heart tells you to take us. We're going to follow you. We will fight. We are eager to fight. As far as we are able, because no man can fight beyond what they're able to fight. And he convinced his brother's hero's heart. And so now the two of them ran, and they found Cabriones. Cabriones, he's the bastard son of Priam. He's the charioteer of Hector. He's a good guy. And blameless Polydamas, he's there too. And now who's joined them? All these guys. All these guys from Ascania that you've never heard of, I've never heard of, but here they are. Phalces and Orthias and Polyphetes, he's like a god. And Palmus. And Ascanios, which makes sense because he's from Ascania. And Morris, who's the son of Hippotion. So now with all of these Trojans, they advance. Now it's like when there's a huge squall of swirling winds that comes and hits upon the purple sea and makes it so that the waves pound and become whitecaps, and those waves pound along the shore one after another. That's how now the Trojans came on, one after another, and in front of all of them was Hector. Hector with his huge, perfectly round shield, always in the front, always testing out the lines with his spear, shaking his spear, trying to get the Argive ranks to break. But the Argive ranks are holding. And it's Ajax. Ajax shouts out to him, Hector, why are you trying to scare the Argives like this, shaking your spear like this? I don't know what you're doing. You think you're going to come over here, but we have many strong hands to defend our ships. You know what? Pretty soon, you are going to be running back to your city, and you are going to be praying to Zeus and to Athena and all of the other gods that your pretty-haired horses are as fast as hawks, those that better carry you back to your own city, which is going to be destroyed. That's what Ajax said. And at that very moment, a bird came up on the right side of the people. And all of the Achaeans, they took encouragement from this eagle, high flying, that swooped over them. And Hector said, Ajax, You are a bully and a babbler. What do you think? You think you're going to drive us back? Us? Well, I dare any man to come on against me and see how he holds up against my spear. I'm pretty sure that he is going to go down dead, and that his body, well, soon enough the Trojan birds and dogs will get their fill of his flesh and of his fat in front of our city of Troy. That's what Hector said. And so now they clashed together, these two armies, and the sound of it was like too much. And the rays that came off of their bronze went all the way up into the ether of Zeus. And Nestor, oh, no. And Nestor, even though he was drinking, Nestor still heard the uproar that came from the battlefield. And right away he said to Asclepius' son, Machaon, he said, Machaon, what do you make of this sound? This sound that is so much louder than the sound that came from the vigorous young men before. Listen, you just sit there, drink. Wait for Hecamede to come. She will give you a hot bath.
Oh, yeah.
And when Hecamede comes and washes all of the bloody gore away with warm water, well, meanwhile, I will go to see what this ruckus is. I will go to the lookout point.
Trouble's over here.
No. Not me.
Too slow with the cue. Too slow with the cue. Thank you all so much again for coming. As usual, we thank Bar de Pain and Amit, our awesome bartender. We thank Alex Martalogu for saving my ass over and over. Sam Windholz on the video. And Jackie Geer, our awesome director this week. Who did all of these drawings. Please come back next week. It will be Micheline Chevrier. And have a wonderful week and enjoy the sunshine.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.